The Crown Season 2 Recap. Episodes 1. Misadventure. In February 1957, Elizabeth and Philip discussed the state of their marriage on board the HMY Britannia in Lisbon, Portugal. Both acknowledge divorce is not an option. 5 months earlier, as Philip prepares to embark on his royal tour, Elizabeth becomes convinced he is having an affair after finding a photograph of ballerina Galina Ulanova in his briefcase. At 10 Downing Street, Chancellor of the Exchequer Harold Macmillan challenges Eden's solution to Egypt's takeover of the Suez Canal but ultimately agrees to military intervention. Mountbatten tells Elizabeth about the plan, and she confronts Eden after learning Israel has invaded Sinai. Eden reveals the invasion was not only planned but part of a secret agreement between the Israeli, French, and British governments to reclaim the Suez Canal without approval from Parliament or the United Nations. Elizabeth reluctantly gives her support and British forces begin moving into Egypt. Episodes 2. A Company of Men. Eden travels to Jamaica with his wife after international political pressure forces him to withdraw British forces from Egypt and damages his reputation. Philip continues his tour, punctuated by an interview he ends when the reporter inquires about his family history. At Christmas, Philip delivers a heartfelt radio address from Graham Land, prompting Elizabeth to let him know his family is waiting for him as part of her own Christmas address. Eileen Parker, the wife of Philip's private secretary Michael, initiates divorce proceedings on infidelity grounds. Charteris warns Eden the fallout could cause the press to ask questions about Elizabeth and Philip's own marriage. Episodes 3. Lisbon. Eden returns from Jamaica and discovers that the cabinet and the Conservative Party blame him for the Suez Crisis fallout, and have turned against him. As he resigns and Macmillan becomes Prime Minister, Eden works with Tommy Lascelles to change Eileen's mind about her divorce. They fail, and Elizabeth, Philip, and Michael learn about the proceedings. Elizabeth's attempt to speak to Eileen also fails, and Philip forces Michael to resign when the divorce becomes public knowledge. Elizabeth brings the royal tour to an end before meeting the Britannia in Lisbon and privately talking with Philip about their marriage. Philip makes it clear he resents Charles outranking him and wants more respect from both the courtiers and the palace staff. Philip is made a Prince of the United Kingdom, with the style His Royal Highness the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. After the ceremony, Michael Eden shaves at Elizabeth's request and Philip says goodbye to Michael, who returns to his native Australia, thanking each other for the life they shared. Episodes 4. Beryl. Still recovering from her decision not to marry Townsend, Margaret accepts a proposal from close friend Billy Wallace and, after gaining Elizabeth's blessing, plans to announce the union during a gala celebrating Elizabeth and Philip's 10th wedding anniversary. On the night of the announcement, however, Margaret breaks off the engagement after finding a drunk Wallace recovering from wounds he received during a duel. The following evening, after a discussion with the Queen Mother about her birthday portrait, Margaret meets photographer Tony Armstrong-Jones at a party and agrees to let him take her picture. Sometime later, she sneaks out to Tony's studio for a sitting. He takes several photographs, after which Margaret asks him to send one to the newspapers. The next day, the picture, in which Margaret appears to be nude, is published to great shock. Macmillan, meanwhile, presses his wife into ending her affair but later discovers that she is still seeing her lover after overhearing them on the telephone. Episodes 5. Marionettes. In response to a speech given by Elizabeth at a car factory in 1956, Lord Altrincham writes an article attacking her style of public speaking and her court's upper-class attitude. Both the general public and the press are initially opposed to Altrincham, but start to sympathize with him after he argues on TV that the monarchy must adapt to the post-war society. After Macmillan reminds her of the tendency of other nations to abolish their monarchies, Elizabeth arranges a meeting with Altrincham, during which she agrees to televise the upcoming royal Christmas message and open the debutante ball to her subjects. 6 months later, the Queen Mother expresses embarrassment over the monarchy's loss of authority while hosting a garden party. Episode 6. Vergangenheit. In 1945, a surrendering German soldier leads American troops to classified documents previously belonging to Adolf Hitler's personal translator. British translators uncovered damning information in a series called the Marburg Files, which Churchill and King George VI agreed to suppress from publication. In the 1950s, the Duke of Windsor returns to the UK to seek employment. Historians uncover the files, and the American government threatens to publish them if the British government does not. The matter is brought to Macmillan and then to Elizabeth, who learns about the Duke's past links with Nazi high command. Elizabeth confronts the Duke, who explained his reasons. Elizabeth contemplates forgiving the Duke, but Philip persuades her to pay Tommy Lascelles a visit. Lascelles, who served as the Duke's private secretary, reveals more details to Elizabeth. Elizabeth denies the Duke's request, berating him for his betrayal, and seeks spiritual counsel from the evangelist Billy Graham. Episode 7. Matrimonium. After learning that Townsend is engaged to a much younger woman, Margaret presses Tony into proposing marriage. Because Elizabeth is pregnant with her third child, protocol prevents her from announcing the engagement. Adine and Lascelles learn Tony has enjoyed a series of sexual relationships, one with a woman presumed to be pregnant with his child. After giving birth to Prince Andrew, Elizabeth decides against telling Margaret. Months later, Margaret and Tony get married at Westminster Abbey on the 6th of May 1960. Episodes 8. Dear Mrs. Kennedy. Elizabeth hosts U.S. President John F. Kennedy and First Lady Jackie Kennedy at Buckingham Palace in June 1961 for dinner, and finds common ground with the First Lady. Later, Elizabeth discovers the First Lady had insulted her and the palace at a party. When President Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana seeks closer ties to the Soviet Union, Elizabeth personally intervenes to bring Ghana back into the fold of the Commonwealth. When the First Lady returns to London, she apologizes to Elizabeth, explaining that she had been under the influence of substances. In 1963, after watching news coverage of Kennedy's assassination, Elizabeth arranges for a week of mourning within the household, and for the bells at Westminster Abbey to be rung, before writing a letter to the First Lady. Episodes 9. Paterfamilias. Philip arranges for Charles to attend Gordonstown in Moray, Scotland, despite protests from Elizabeth and Mountbatten, both of whom recommend Eton College. Philip, however, gets his way after using his deal with Elizabeth to compel her to back him. While taking Charles to the school, Philip recalls his time there, as well as the death of his older sister Cecile and her family, for which his father Andrew blamed him. Charles struggles with Gordonstown's rigorous curriculum and, on the day of a school event, disappears, only for his security detail to find him crying. Philip takes Charles home, admonishing him for being bloody weak after an attempt to give him a pep talk fails. Episodes 10. Mystery Man. In 1962, Philip visits osteopath Stephen Ward after injuring his neck. The following year, knowledge of an affair between Secretary of State for War John Profumo and model Christine Keeler, who is believed to have simultaneously been involved with Soviet military attaché Captain Yevgeny Ivanov, becomes public. As Ward is charged with immorality offenses and brought to trial, the press speculates about the identity of a mystery man seen in a photograph taken at one of Ward's parties, with Margaret and Tony noticing the man's similarities to Philip. Ward commits suicide before a verdict is reached, after which the police find a hand-drawn portrait of Philip among his belongings. Macmillan resigns on ill health grounds and recommends Alec Douglas Holmes succeed him. Douglas Holmes' close ties to the royal family make the appointment controversial. Elizabeth asks Philip if he is the mystery man and confronts him with Ulanova's portrait. Philip admits to knowing Ward but denies attending any of his parties, and reaffirms his love and support for Elizabeth. Elizabeth gives birth to Prince Edward. The end. Please subscribe my YouTube channel Teddy's Best Story Time. See you next time.